Defense lawyers of Reddit, what is it like to defend a client who has confessed to you that they're guilty of a violent crime? Do you still genuinely go out of your way to defend them? My criminal law professor said that he preferred guilty clients because he could do his best to ensure a fair procedure, but if he lost he didn't sweat it. He took it a lot harder when he would lose a trial for a client that he thought was innocent. It's about holding the state accountable. I don't care if my guy did it. If we let the state lock him up without doing its job properly, that means next week it could be you, or me, or your mom that gets sent up for something we didn't do. Although I am not an attorney, I have been represented by one for a speeding ticket that I was 100% guilty of. He wrote a trial by written declaration which is available to people in California, and in the document he basically wrote asking if the street was tested for a speed test to make sure the speed limit was posted accurately, and he mentioned stuff regarding wanting records for the radar gun used, and poof, 3 weeks later got a letter in the mail saying dismissed. I was so happy, but I am not going to lie, I felt slightly guilty still in the end. A defense lawyer's job is to make sure the prosecution is doing their job correctly. I've never really understood the hate for defense lawyers. They are a vital part of the justice system, making sure the prosecutor is doing their damn job properly. You know who are the true bottom feeders of society? Fucking real estate agents. I had a lawyer. I confessed to my grand theft auto to my lawyer, but I was with 4 others who did it. We spoke of plea options, but he wanted to wait and grant continuances to see how the other cases were built. I ended up getting off like a year and a half later. One guy pleaded guilty and got safe house. Another got probation and 2 of us got off completely. I never had to speak in court other than to ask for continuances when he was unable to make it. Then it just got dropped eventually. I was the only one who lawyered up immediately. The guy who got safe house fell for the "we have you on video" with no attorney present. There ended up being no video. If everyone had lawyered up, we probably wouldn't have got any time because we took a car for a joyride that had the keys in it, then ditched it somewhere else. Some fellow college students saw us in the vehicle and some guy stole some other guy's girlfriend, and that guy went to the cops with information since we were blabbermouths and told people we stole it, and that is what got us in questioning. This was like 15 years ago when I was in college. Not a lawyer, but I sat on a jury for a murder sentencing trial. The guy confessed and there were 15 witnesses who watched him shoot a young father of 3 at a baby shower while on a meth bender. I'll give his lawyer credit, he earned his fee. I think he was going for a 10-year sentence versus life. He brought in a psychologist explaining how the guy's IQ was so low he couldn't be held responsible. Guy's mom was on the stand crying about how terrible a mother she was and how it was her fault. It almost worked. I had to convince half of the jury to switch their votes to a life sentence. I am a defense lawyer as well. TLDR. The criminal justice system is so oppressive I don't care, so if a guilty client or 2 gets off scot-free, on the whole it benefits society. There are 2 kinds of defense lawyers, the ones that live for getting an innocent client off, and those that live for getting a guilty client off. I am probably the latter kind. At the end of the day, most defense attorneys, especially those in more rural areas, believe the sentencing and fines for most offenses are outrageous, especially for indigent clients, and perpetuate a system of oppression of the disenfranchised. Marijuana possession $600 2 days jail, and substance abuse classes. Operating while intoxicated, whether sitting in a car with the engine running because it's cold, or legit drunk driving, easily $2,000 along with license suspension, increased insurance costs, and 2 days jail. Often sentences come with 1-2 years of probation, which drags on with 180 days in jail if they don't do well enough. Edit. Didn't expect this kind of response. Thanks for the lovely discussion. Not a lawyer. My law teacher in high school was a former defense lawyer. She quit lawyering because she defended and won a case where she knew her client was guilty for killing a child. Greatest law teacher ever. Not a defense lawyer, just a Fed clerk, but I'm in a docket with a heavy criminal docket. First off, you have to remember that most criminal proceedings end in a plea deal. So whether or not the client is guilty doesn't really matter. Your job as a defense lawyer isn't to prove they're innocent in that situation. It's to make sure they plea in an intelligent and informed way, get the appropriate benefit for cooperating, and don't get fucked over by the govt. Same with sentencing disputes. The exact details surrounding what someone did can have major implications for sentencing, even if the basic fact that something illegal happened is already established. As for actual trials, as the defense attorneys in this thread have noted, the goal is to ensure that people are adequately represented. The ideal of the US legal system is that an adversarial process is the best way to establish the truth. Former cop checking in. Regardless of how many people I put in cuffs, everybody deserves a right to a fair trial. It's innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around. For any defendant, whether that's Cosby, Dahmer, R. Kelly, or the old guy down the street fighting a speeding ticket, my hat's off to the defense for doing all they do. They have my utmost respect because they really do put in 100% to ensure a fair trial. A lot of non-lawyers chiming in. The real question is, if your client confesses and then another innocent person gets convicted of that crime, what do you do? I think it's interesting that you see ethical questions like this for defense attorneys a lot, but not the obverse of that coin for the prosecutors who deliberately send innocent people to prison. That to me seems just mind-blowingly unethical. I guess my sympathies are more with those innocent people because I've seen several lives messed up that way, some of people I care a lot about. An attorney has an ethical duty to represent their client zealously. That is true whether we know a client is guilty or not. Whether in court or during pre-trial proceedings, we will challenge and evaluate the state's evidence. True whether trying to get a client off all charges, looking to plea, or just figure out a defense strategy. Innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt is a heavy burden. It is a higher standard than guilty by clear and convincing evidence and by the preponderance of the evidence. The reason is simple. If the government is going to take a person's liberty or even their life, they had better not be overreaching. The burden is therefore on the prosecution. A defense attorney holds the prosecutor to that. Public defender here. I describe my job as part doctor, part tour guide. Like a doctor, sometime I can cure you, but sometimes I can just try to make it hurt less. Sometimes I can't do either. Then I'm a tour guide who makes sure that you understand what is happening, why it is happening, and try to give you as much choice in the matter as possible. At the very least, I sit next to you in court so you don't have to face the judge by yourself. Everyone deserves a defense. It's less about the defendant and more about making sure the state proves its case and can't railroad any defendants. If they admit guilt, you have an ethical duty to not make false representations to the court. You have to work your best with the laws. You have to make some sort of defense. You can argue that the law is unconstitutional, that he is insane, etc. But you can't lie and say he is innocent. Frequently, I do not ask outright if someone did it or not. You can sort of tell. For example, you can ask, would you be willing to submit to a polygraph test about that? And if they say no, you can be pretty sure they have something to hide, unless they have another reason to not submit to one. However, most of the time, we are not arguing someone is innocent. We are arguing that the defendant should get a lighter sentence and that there are mitigating factors. There are some people I will never defend, namely child molesters, because I hate them too much to zealously defend them, which is a conflict of interest, and b, if I did zealously defend them and get them a slap on the wrist, I'd hate myself for it. The point of a defense lawyer is not to get people off their sentence but to ensure the right to fair trial is upheld. Defense lawyers in that situation will be looking for leniency in sentencing to make sure the justice process doesn't become vindictive or vengeful. I'm late to the party, but one thing I've noticed is missing from many top comments is discussion of a lawyer's ethical obligations to the bar and to the court. If your client confesses his guilt to you, you cannot elicit false testimony from your client on the stand. You cannot knowingly present false information to the court, and if you become aware of that falsity after the fact, you have an obligation to correct the record. It can get complicated with things like your client testifying. You can choose not to call your client's friend to the stand if you know he will lie, but your client has an absolute right to testify. When you know that your client is guilty but he insists on testifying that he is not, you can have him give narrative testimony in which you, as his lawyer, do not participate. The standard is typically whether or not you know that something isn't true, not whether you strongly suspect it is. I used to give some judicial advice, not in the US, and I think you have the wrong idea about lawyers. It's not their job to prove someone is innocent. It is to defend the rights of the defendant. That means, for instance, that the procedures must be correct and that the state does its job of building up a reasonable case. And if the person is guilty, he or she still needs a fair trial and a fair sentence. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe.